Here's how you can get ahead of 99% of people. Shift from linear thinking, which 99% of people use, to systems thinking by applying key mental models. We live in a nonlinear world, but most people are trapped in linear thinking. Through years of mainstream education, we're taught to think in parts, breaking the world into smaller, manageable pieces and viewing problems separately from their systemic roots. In linear thinking, one thing leads to the next in a straightforward, step by step way. For example, we're often told that to be successful, you just need to get into the right school, land the perfect internship, get a good job, and climb the corporate ladder. But when we enter the real world, we quickly realize that life doesn't follow that simple, predictable path. Instead, we find ourselves needing to figure things out all over again, whether that means changing careers, going back to school, or starting a business. This is because the whole is more than just the sum of its parts, and it's often the connections between those parts that show us how things really work. Everything around us is made up of systems, and if you don't understand the system, it will own you. Being able to see and understand the entire system, instead of just focusing on individual parts, gives you a huge advantage in today's complex world. But how can we move away from linear thinking and start seeing the full picture, systems and all? The easiest and most practical way to start is by using certain mental models, which act like lenses that help us see and understand the systems we interact with. Number 1. The systems thinking iceberg. Just like an iceberg, where only 10% is visible above the water while the remaining 90% is hidden below, most situations have more going on beneath the surface than what we initially see. The iceberg model helps us break down reality into 4 essential layers: events, patterns, structures, and mental models. Let's say you missed a project deadline. This is the event level, what we notice and react to immediately. Most people would focus only on this and try to fix it by extending the next deadline. But the iceberg model encourages us to dig deeper. When we look just below the surface, we often see patterns. This is when we start asking, has this happened before? And begin searching for repeating trends. For example, you might notice that this relates to several instances of missed review meetings. As we dig deeper, we try to find the structures behind these patterns. These could include tools, processes, or even workplace policies. For example, you might discover that an inexperienced project lead or multiple layers of decision-making are causing delays in approvals. At the deepest level, we explore the mental models, beliefs, assumptions, and mindsets that allow these structures to exist. This could include a lack of belief in the project's importance or its goals. Here, the focus isn't on the behavior itself, but on the motivation driving it. Zooming out is a helpful way to understand how things affect each other. The iceberg model is all about asking why multiple times and looking deeper. Instead of jumping to a quick fix, it's about finding the right solution. Next, let's talk about bottlenecks. Every system has various constraints, but there is always one main constraint that's more limiting than the others, like the weakest link in a chain. This main constraint is called the bottleneck, the point where water flows through a narrow section, which blocks progress. If you don't remove this bottleneck, you won't be able to move forward, so the best strategy is to focus on your bottleneck first and ignore everything else in the meantime. For a company, a bottleneck could be the need for manager approval for everything, which slows down progress. Even if you improve employee performance or invest in better software, the process will remain slow because the managers, not the team or tools, are the bottleneck. For an individual, a bottleneck might be a lack of skills for career growth, a heavy workload, or mental health challenges. It's the key thing that holds you back and stops you from reaching your goals. Once you remove this bottleneck, your whole system, your life, can improve significantly. Number 3, margin of safety. Let's say you're an engineer designing a bridge to hold 200 cars. If you only design it for that exact number, and one day 240 cars are on it, the bridge could collapse, leading to lawsuits and jail time. To avoid this, engineers design bridges to handle much more, like 600 cars. This extra capacity is called the margin of safety. It's a way of dealing with the reality that if things can go wrong, they will. It's the buffer you build into a system to handle unexpected situations. The concept of a safety margin is useful in all areas of life because it allows room for error. The key is to always ask yourself, what if I'm wrong? What if things don't go as planned? You protect yourself by creating a buffer between what you expect and what could actually happen. For example, if you have a job and are worried about possible layoffs, instead of just hoping for the best and planning to find a new job if it happens, you can build a margin of safety. This could mean saving 20% of your income to create an emergency fund, helping you stay financially secure. during tough times. The bigger the buffer, the more chaos you can handle and the less stressed you'll be. Next, let's talk about the law of diminishing returns. This concept suggests that after a certain point, the more time or effort you invest in something, the less you get out of it. Once you reach that point, the effort isn't worth the small gains, as you're getting less value for your time. It's like squeezing a lemon. The first squeeze is easy, but by the fifth, you're struggling for just a few drops. For example, if you try to work after 10 exhausting hours, not only will it take you longer, but the quality will suffer so much that you'll have to spend even more time fixing it later. In this case, stopping and getting some rest is a better use of your time. Similarly, if you're working on a task that needs to be perfect, like writing a report or preparing a presentation, sometimes aiming for 90% is good enough. The time and effort spent on that last 10% may not add much value and would be better spent by stopping and moving on to something else. The key idea is that understanding diminishing returns is essential for using your resources wisely. This means knowing when to stop and focusing on areas where you get the most value. Number 5, stock and flow. At its core, any system is made up of stocks and flows. Stocks are quantities that accumulate over time, like water, money, or self-confidence. Flows are what increase or decrease these stocks, such as rainfall, income, or successes. Stocks are affected by the flows that go in and out of the system. Take your bank account as an example. The money in your account represents the stock. Every time you make a deposit or withdrawal, money flows in or out, changing the balance over time and affecting the system's overall state. If you want to grow your savings, you can either increase the inflow by depositing more or decrease the outflow by spending less. Now, think of self-confidence like a battery that charges with successes and drains with failures. The stock, your current level of self-confidence, is what you've built up and kept over time. Even if your confidence is strong now, a series of failures could quickly drain it, which could lead to problems later. Ultimately, the stock and flow model helps explain how a system works and how it can be influenced or improved over time. The last model is feedback loops. At its core, a feedback loop is a cycle where the results of an action feed back into the system to guide future actions. You take an action, receive feedback, adjust based on that feedback, and repeat. Feedback loops help us track progress toward our goals and adjust our actions to improve results. There are two main kinds of feedback loops: positive feedback, which increases changes and pushes things further in one direction, and negative feedback, which helps stabilizes the system and prevents going too far off track. For example, feedback loops strongly influence our habits and behaviors. Receiving praise or rewards for a job well done creates a positive feedback loop, encouraging us to keep performing well. On the other hand, if we criticize ourselves after mistakes or have a manager who responds harshly to errors, it creates a negative feedback loop, leading to stress and lower performance. This negative loop can signal that it's time to try a new approach to get back on the track. Understanding feedback loops helps us make smarter choices and achieve better results. All right, that's it. If you want to learn how to get more done in 12 weeks than others do in 12 months, check out the next video.